So there's no doubt that each of us can confirm that this spiritual journey is one of very distinct stages. Each of those stages ending in a dark night of the soul, that is the phase where the transition takes place. The old is demolished so that the new can arrive. But oftentimes an analogy has been made that this spiritual journey is like a building with 9 stories, and the bottom story is like the bargain basement that arrives when we ask the question, who am I and what am I doing here? And passes through all the various stages of refinement, as it is in alchemical terms, that we arrive at a stage that we could call the divine life, or Nirvikalpa Samadhi, or Satchitananda. But it has been found over all of these years that it's the Sufi stories that hold for us, like a holograph, they're whole and complete, but they contain the part, and the part contains the whole. So in telling one of those Sufi stories, the question that arises from it is, from your experience, what does this story remind you of as one of those very clear phases or stages that we go through in our journey, our alchemical journey of refinement, going through each and every story, not missing one, as we cannot do when we get into a lift. We have to pass through every stage, however brief it might be. So a Sufi story that is a holograph, a whole that contains a part that contains a whole. And in the telling and in evoking in you what stage it reminds you of, perhaps chemically, alchemically, will allow something to happen for us relative to this holographic image. And it's a story about a princess called Aisha, and to pass her time of day and night, she had a bird called a bulbul. Now a bulbul bird is like a nightingale that trills day and night. And she loved this bird. She loved its song. But one night, a full moon night, when she was very restless, she got up and went to the cage in which the bird was contained, and she said to the bird, "Please, please, my beloved bird, will you trill for me and put me to sleep so that I can dream the dream that I've had so often of a wonderful garden place?" And to her very great surprise, her beloved bird answered, "I cannot sing for you tonight because I am so sad." She was greatly surprised that her beloved bird could speak to her in a human voice. So she asked the bird, "What is it that troubles you?" And her bird said, "Take me from the cage and I will tell you." So she opened the cage door and allowed the bird to rest on her hand. And the bird spoke and said, I am really a prince who had a spell cast on me by an evil demon, doomed to stay in this form and caged and singing until the spell is broken. Now the princess was very intrigued, and she said, How can this magic take place? What is it that needs to happen? And he said, in your dreams, that garden that you go to is the place where the magic powder that can transform me back into human form is to be found. It is contained in a large sack that lays under the bed of a great dev. She said, I will go. I will find this powder for you to restore you to your human form. What must I do? So the bird, the prince in the form of a bird, explained to her how she should make her way through that garden to find herself at the abode of the great giant dev, where the powder was kept. But the prince in bird form said, but please heed what I say carefully. You must not eat or drink anything contained in that garden, otherwise you will be doomed to stay there, and I will be doomed to remain in the form of a bird for the rest of my life. So with that, the princess asked the bird to sing for her, placing it carefully back in the cage. The nightingale began to trill, sending the princess off into a deep sleep, and the dream that took her into the garden very clearly remembered, and taking heed of what the prince had said, she followed the path through the garden. She came to a stream, and as she was looking in that stream, wanting to quench her thirst, a beautiful fish of rainbow colors came to the surface and said, hasten quickly, do not stay here, otherwise your bird will die, and reminded the princess not to drink. So she went on and on. Of course, she became tired, hungry, and thirsty, but in that traversing of that pathway, a beautiful bird came down, reminding her, hasten quickly, else the bird will die, and do not eat or drink. Finally, she came to the great edifice that was the abode of the dev, and making her way in, she came to the bed chamber and saw under the bed the great sack that contained the powder, the magic powder. She climbed under the bed, and taking a pinch of the powder, she carefully placed it in the corner of her silk handkerchief, tying it with a knot. But just as she was about to leave, the great thundering sound of the footsteps of the dev could be heard. She was terrified, not knowing what to do, but remaining silent and still under the bed, being careful not even to let her breath have a sound. She lay as the great dev lay down on his bed, it creaking and groaning beneath him. As soon as she could hear the snores of this great demon, she very carefully, silently crept out on her hands and knees to make her way out of this edifice and the garden. But just as she came out of the house, a great black dog chased her, its fangs dripping. So she ran as quickly as she could, not to allow this beast to catch her. She made her way out of the garden, and in a trice she found herself back in her bedchamber, in her bed. Waking up, she got up and took the bird out of the cage, and as it sat on her finger, she took out from her kerchief the magic powder, dusted it on the feathers, and immediately before her eyes, her beautiful and beloved bird was transformed into the handsome prince that he was. With the shock of this, Aisha fainted to the floor, and she awoke to find her favorite servant bending over her, bringing water to her parched lips. And the prince stood by, and when she arose to her feet, he said to her, as we can well know how these stories end, that they knew their love for one another. They were married, and the prince took Aisha back to his kingdom, where they lived a happy, prosperous life. A whole that contains a part, and a part that contains a whole. What phase, segment of your spiritual journey does this story evoke for you? Clearly recognizing the stages that we pass through, the levels of purification that have brought us to this. Satchitananda, existence, knowledge and bliss, the divine life, samadhi, known by different names, but as with alchemy and the Sufi stories, wholeness, the holographic whole. Of what is this a part, this story for you? Doesn't it arise for us in any situation, in any encounter, that the stories that we tell, the experiences that we share, are those segments, history of our experiences? Do we yet recognize that each and every one of those stories contains the whole that we are? Have you yet recognized your holographic nature? Face of your life, does this story remind